Hello and welcome to yet another small cooking vignette. I'm going to be covering some very basics in this video, which are basically pastry, crumble and scones, because they're all very much the same and they use the same group of ingredients. So the basis for starting is 8 ounces of self-raising flour. Now you might be wondering why I'm using self-raising flour in a crumble. Well, it's just because the self-raising flour is to hand, and it doesn't matter that it's self-raising. I'm not asking it to rise, I'm not giving it any moisture in which to help it rise. I'm just going to be putting some fat and some sugar in it. So for this purpose it doesn't matter. And I'm also using self-raising flour in my pastry because I like my pastries to be light and fluffy. So you can use plain if you like, but this is my recipe and I think you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm going to measure out my 8 ounces of flour. So there is my flour. If you don't have a weighing scale to hand, this is actually 12 heaped spoons, like that, of flour. Okay, it works out, or a cup and a half. 1.5 cups. So the ratio for pastry is 8 ounces of flour and half as much fat. So I've weighed out 4 ounces of butter, so I'm going to drop that in. And this, see, that is where the fun starts, because that butter has to be crumbled into the flour. So you mix with your fingertips, ladies and gentlemen, this is really important. Just use your fingertips and lift and squeeze, and what you can see is the butter's already breaking up. Okay, it's breaking up beautifully. So I want all that butter dispersed. In the end, this is called the rubbed in method. In the end, this mixture will look like fine breadcrumbs. Keep going. As I say, try and just use your fingertips, not your hands, because you'll find it'll stick all over the place and it's a nightmare to get off. So, as you can see, the mixture's changing now. It's looking quite good. Oh, crikey. Okay, and that's your basic crumble mix. So, if I'm going to put that in a crumble, I need to add a couple of ounces of sugar. Now crumbles, gorgeous on top of stewed apples, or you can do a savoury crumble. I'm doing a sweet crumble to go on top of some apple and brambles that we picked earlier this year. So the finished result is this. Okay, looks really tasty already. So I'm going to add 2 ounces of sugar. Don't worry if you don't have caster sugar to hand, sugar is sugar. The caster sugar is just finer, that's all, but I actually just use plain normal sugar in my baking, and I've never had any complaints. So there's my sugar going in to the crumble mixture, and I'm just going to give that a very gentle stir round. And that's your crumble. That's your very, very basic crumble. Now you can add to that, you could add some cinnamon to it. You can add some just porridge oats to it to give it a bit of extra crunch. You can add some oatmeal to it. You could even add coconut. It's just the basic crumble, and the possibilities are endless. You could even add chocolate chips if you wanted to. Absolutely anything. But that is going to be gorgeous on top of some baked apples and brambles. So the next thing I'm going to be making is some plain pastry for the bottom of my crumble. Okay everybody, welcome back to part 2 of our cooking video. I've bagged the crumble mixture up for now, because if I only use half of it, I can actually put the rest of it in the freezer just like that. So that's really, really useful. I probably will only use half of it, to be fair. So, and now on to the pastry. So once again, 8 ounces of flour, or 12 heaped tablespoons of flour, or 1.5 cups. I don't need any sugar in pastry, so it's just half as much fat. So if I've added 8 ounces of flour, I need 4 ounces of butter. So here we go. I don't know how you do this with a cup. It's probably 1/4 of a packet. Let me check that theory. 1/4 of a packet seems to be 2 ounces, so half a packet of butter or margarine, stock margarine, is 4 ounces. So you can see that I'm going to be putting this into my bowl. Again, because it's in big chunks and it's straight out of the fridge, it's really hard. So I'm just going to slice it up into little chunks, let it drop in the flour. It'll be easier for me to rub it all together shortly. And again, pastry is really easy to freeze, so make a pound bag. Use a 1 pound bag of flour, freeze it. It'll last for ages, at least 3 months in the freezer. And then it's always there. Just take it out a couple of hours before and you've got some lovely homemade fresh pastry. I've bought the frozen just roll stuff before, just for ease, and I found that when I freeze it and then take it out to use, it's kind of a horrible grey colour and looks really unappetising, so I don't recommend that. I recommend making your own and putting it away for another day. Perhaps you could make jam tarts and stuff with the kids. Awesome. I know my little boy loves baking, so just a quick check that we were recording then. So this is, again, rubbed in method. It's quite hard, is this butter at the moment, so it's taking some doing. You can do this in a mixer, by the way. Just be careful because the flour tends to fly off everywhere. So this is my pastry. Once again, keep rubbing. You want an even distribution of all the fat into the flour. So whether you're using butter or margarine, it makes no difference, but it has to resemble fine breadcrumbs. Otherwise you'll get big greasy pockets in your pastry and bits of floury patches where the pastry will just break up. So keep mixing, stick with it. It'll all be worth it. You can add a pinch of salt to this if you're doing a savoury pastry, or you could add a tiny, tiny dash of sugar just to make it a little bit sweeter. Most of the time the butter's slightly salted anyway, so if you're using butter, and you don't have to, it's quite extravagant making pastry with butter, I would recommend using stock margarine. Not so sure about some of these other margarines that are on the market at the moment, because to be quite honest, if you look at the ingredients in them, worrying. Fortified with vitamins, why do they have to do that? Plenty of natural goodness in butter, plenty of protein and calcium, so, and a little bit of butter is good for you, I've been told. And look at me, I'm 50 and I never eat anything but butter on my toast anyway. So, okay, I think that's just about ready now. It could do with being a little bit finer, but for the purpose of this video it'll be fine. So there you go. That's ready to have some very, very cold water added to it. And this is the secret. Just bear with me while I go and get some very cold water from the tap. Okay, nice and cold, chilled from the tap. If you've ever made pastry before, you'll know that sometimes it can be quite tough. Well, that's because it's probably been handled too much. So the least amount of time that you can spend actually touching it when you've got it mixed, the better. So I've made a little well in the middle and I'm going to add some water. You just want a tiny bit in the middle, and bring the rest of the flour mixture over it and keep stirring it in. Can you see that? It's starting to bind together, but there's a lot of crumbly stuff around the edges, so just bear with it. Maybe a tiny bit more. Add very little at a time. You can always add more, but you can't take it out once you've once you've added your water, and you don't want to end up with a mixture that's running. You can see now it's actually pulling together, and so far I haven't had to touch it once. Now that it's all pulled together, it's stuck to the bowl beautifully, and that's my pastry, which I'm going to stick some flour onto the worktop like that, and just show you my lovely pastry. There you go. And there we are, pastry ready to roll. If you're not going to use it all, cut it in half or quarters, depending on how much you've made and what you need it for. Just cut it in half and freeze half of it. So easy. Okay, stick it in a bag and put that away, ready for steak pie tomorrow. So there's my pastry. This is another thing, when you're rolling it out, again, the less handling you can do with the pastry, the better. Okay. Keep adding more flour onto your worktop as well. Don't touch it touch it as little as you can. Just rubbing the flour over so that I don't get any sticky patches. Okay. I don't know if you can actually see what I'm doing there. It's quite tricky. Okay. Pastry's all rolled out. Can you see that? Rolled out now, and I'm now going to line a dish with it. Try and... Ooh. Okay. Right. So in order to pick the pastry up off the worktop, I'm going to leave my rolling pin halfway across it, and I'm going to pull the pastry up like that. Put my bowl in front of it, and I'm going to lift it ever so slightly and then roll it back into the dish like that. Very gently. Let it drop down, do its thing, and gently press it with your knuckles into the dish. Okay, and this is the bit, I always remember watching my grandma and my mum doing this. Just whiz round it with the edge of a knife like that. Favourite bit. And there's your pastry. That's going to be blind baked in the oven for half an hour just to seal it so that the juices from my fruit that's going in it don't soak in. So I'm going to fill that with some dried peas on top of some greaseproof paper and just let it gently bake in the oven for half an hour to cook it through. And that will stop any of the lovely moist ingredients soaking into the pastry, and I won't have a soggy pastry base. Okay? So in we go. And that's that. Okay, they've come out of the oven now, and that's what they look like. And I'm just about to try one with a great big dollop of butter. So